Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming in. My name is Joellen Fair. I'm serving this year as the chair to the University Committee. I am also a faculty member in the School of Journalism and African Studies. Let me provide you with a little bit of information before we start this event. First of all, I want to say thank you to everyone for coming out on a cold day. At least it's sunny out, but thank you everyone for attending. First, the Chancellor will speak for a few minutes, and then we'll open up to question and answers. We have 2 microphones right over here, so please come up to the microphone. Wait until you're acknowledged so that we don't have 2 people trying to speak at the same time. Wait to be acknowledged. If you feel comfortable, please give your name and where you work or what you do on campus. And then what we would like you to do is to have one question or a question and a follow-on, but please don't come up to the microphone any more than once until it looks like we've cleared out the line, that everyone has gotten a chance who wants to have a chance to ask a question. So we want to get as many people through as possible, and that also means that we want to stay at a pretty good clip. So if you are speaking for a long time, I might interrupt. I don't want to do that, but I might have to interrupt so that we can get as many people who want to ask questions able to ask their questions. So I think that's about it. There's also translation services available in the back, as has been announced. If you need those to ask a question, please let us know. Thanks.
That's all right. In case you didn't know. Good afternoon, everyone. I think this room seats, about 500 people or a little more, and I'm just delighted to see the crowd here today. And let me very much start by saying thank you. Thank you for coming out this afternoon, and thank you for being part of this forum and for your many ways in which you serve the university and you serve the state by all that you do. I am well aware, whether you are a professor, an academic staff member, a classified staff member, or a student, that all of you are an important part of this community, and this is an important conversation for all of us. So the reason that we're all here this afternoon is to address possible questions relating to the governor's recent budget proposal, and let me start by being very clear. There are a lot of things we still don't have the answers to. We're very much in the midst of a process of looking at how the university is going to respond to this, of talking with the legislature, of determining what the end game is, and what the final budget cuts are going to look like. The governor has passed down his budget proposal that goes to the Assembly and the Senate. There is a long period here of sort of quiet conversation and discussion. The Joint Finance Committee of the Assembly and Senate will deal with this with hearings and public discussion, probably in late April, early May. They will come to the recommendation to both of those bodies, and there will be a final vote at a guess in late May, early June. So we're very much in the very opening days of a very long-term conversation about this budget and what it is going to look like. It is, as I've said to many people, this is a marathon, not a sprint, and you can't get too excited about anything that happens on any one day because it's a very long process, all right? Moving forward, we are going to be posting information as we get more. We have set up a website called budget.wisc.edu. On there, we're posting a growing frequently asked questions document, and based on the questions, we held a forum last night at 11 o'clock for our second and third shift workers. I'm really glad this is not 11 at night, that it's the middle of the afternoon. And these questions, the questions from tomorrow morning's forum, we are going to be expanding those questions, so common questions that a lot of people have will be addressed in that FAQ document. Also on that website is the presentation I made Thursday to the Board of Regents, which has some more details about the budget in it. And as other information becomes available, watch that website, budget.wisc.edu. So again, let me start by saying I appreciate everything you do on behalf of the teaching, research, and the outreach missions of this university. I understand the role that all our employees play in supporting our missions of education, research, and outreach. We cannot operate without the researchers, teachers, custodians, outreach specialists, administrative assistants, steam fitters, student services staff, to name just a few. Everyone plays a role in keeping this university strong. I will also note that we have weathered a lot of storms in the last 166 years of history. These proposed budget cuts and the criticisms coming at the university are not terribly unusual if you know anything about this university's history, and we indeed will find ways to meet these challenges and to maintain the real excellence and quality that this university has. But I'm going to tell you, we're going to have budget cuts this year. I have said multiple times they are too big, and I am hoping that we will be able to negotiate something a little different than the original proposal. But I think there is no doubt that some budget cuts will be coming down to us, and probably more than we would actually like to deal with. I want to emphasize that's not the result of some deal in which we could have had lower budget cuts. I think the proposal that was on the table was actually reasonably clear. You can have $300 million in budget cuts, or you can have $300 million in budget cuts plus some ability to have more flexibility in how you manage the university. And I'll come back and talk about those two issues, but we are going to have to figure out how we deal with a substantial budget shortage next year, even before we know exactly what that final amount is going to be. So let me start with just a little bit of math as to what is this looking like, okay? You've all read that there's a $300 million proposed budget cut. That's biennial math. So that's $300 across the 2 years of the biennium. It's $150 million per year. Our share of that is $57 million, if we get passed down our standard share from the system. Now, unfortunately, that's not the only cuts in the budget for this university and others. There are other things they are doing, such as canceling out the matching money for the Wisconsin Bioenergy Initiative, a number of things like that, which probably add up to another $6 to $8 million off of our budget here at Madison. I will also note that there's some changes in the way they're funding fringe benefits that looks like it might add about another $10 million to our budget cuts. And, as many of you know, we got a budget cut 2 years ago, and we were told not to take it. We were told to spend down our reserves rather than acknowledging that budget cut. So we have spent down reserves in the last 2 years, and the result is that I am sitting already on a $23 million budget cut that I must now take because I have no more reserves to spend down. So if you add up 57, 6 to 8, about 10 in fringe benefits, and 23, we're talking about somewhere between $90 and $100 million in cuts that we're going to have to be dealing with. And let me tell you, that is a big number. And as I said last week, and as I've been saying to every person I talk to, that is just too much for this university, and it's too much for the state. The budget hole, to talk about what this means, it is the equivalent of, we're not doing this, but it is the equivalent of simply canceling out and closing down and stopping all business with either the schools of law, nursing, pharmacy, veterinary medicine, or business. Those are our 5 smallest schools. If we shut all of them down, we wouldn't quite fill the budget hole. Or if you want to talk about slightly bigger schools, we could shut 2 medium-sized schools. We could simply close down engineering and CALS, the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. That wouldn't fill the budget cut. It gives you a sense of what the size of this is. So while we aren't going to know the final number until May or June, even if it comes down, it's a big budget cut, and we have to do planning. And there are a number of things that we're going to be doing. First of all, we are going to be looking for new revenues. As many of you know, the governor's budget proposal continues a freeze on in-state undergraduate tuition. But we have to have new revenues from somewhere. So we will be looking at an increase in out-of-state tuition, and I won't say this is good news for our out-of-state students. It's good news for us if we have to do this, that we're currently near the bottom of the tuition rates in the Big Ten, and our applications out of state have grown very strongly over the last 5 to 10 years. So we're currently admitting less than 20% of our out-of-state applicants. So we can push the out-of-state tuition up some and not in any way threaten the quality of our applicants. And that gives us some wiggle room that some other schools don't have. We're also going to be looking at some price increases in the professional schools, and our professional schools are, like in many cases, the cheapest one in the country. This makes no sense given the quality of these schools. And the anecdote I like to use is with the School of Veterinary Medicine. Our out-of-state veterinary medicine tuition right now is below the in-state tuition for the University of Illinois. So, we have people coming here because we're cheaper than staying in state in Illinois. This makes no sense. And of course, if I can find more revenues for the professional schools, that frees up some of my central money that I can then redirect into the undergraduate program and help subsidize undergraduate students. So these two together, out-of-state tuition changes and professional school tuition changes, we're going to go to the Board of Regents and ask for that. I'm also going to ask for a small increase in our cap on out-of-state students. We can currently admit no more than 27.5% of our class out of state. I'd like to raise that to 30%. The tuition increases are going to net us, if we get approval from Regents for what I'm going to ask, about $18 million. That's $18 million on a $90 to $100 million hole. The increase in the cap on out-of-state students would net about another 18. I'm now at 36. And what should be very clear is tuition increases of any sort, while a necessary way to fill the hole, are certainly not going to solve our budget problems. And it's a sign, again, of how large the budget hole is. So we, secondly, have to be looking at budget cuts. As you all know, state dollars that come into this university are almost all focused in schools and colleges and education-related programs. So my challenge in part is, I don't want to cut those programs only. I've got to spread these cuts across the university in some way. And working with Darryl Bazell, our Vice Chancellor for Finance and Administration, we're looking at ways to spread these cuts so schools and colleges and education programs don't bear the sole brunt of them. We are relying on deans, directors, department chairs to be working together to decide exactly how these cuts come down. It is way too soon for me to tell you, what we're going to do, what the implications of this are going to be for any one department or group of people. But there will be budget cuts across the university. We're going to do what we can with lapses in positions, but I'm also going to be very blunt, and I've said this publicly, there are almost surely going to be layoffs in many units across the university. I don't see how we avoid that. I am very sorry about that, and when I talked last night primarily to a group of classified staff, I said if there was a way to avoid this, believe me, I would try to find it, but with the current budget hole, there will be layoffs, okay? We are committed to saying that administrative units are going to take deeper cuts than schools and colleges, and if we can, we're going to try to cut, in some way, touch all parts of campus. So at the moment, we don't have specifics on this, but you will be working on this. I hope you work through your governance groups in your schools, colleges, your departments, your groups, as people are trying to figure out what are the cuts we're going to take to do this. I will also note we are always looking for ways to improve efficiency, to do things better. One of the things that Darryl Bazell is putting up is a workspace whereby people who have ideas, how do we run better? How do we run cheaper? What should we be doing that we're not? This huge, huge organization, there are always things that we don't know about, aren't implementing. Send us your ideas on that. We're going to look through those really carefully, too, to see what are some other options here. I will note, however, I often hear, well, the university is just a huge bloated organization. You just cut administrative staff. We're big. We're very big. But being big does not mean you're bloated, right? We're big because we have 43,000 students. And that means, and we have $1.1 billion in research dollars coming in. And that means we need a large staff to handle all of that. I've looked at the comparisons of the University of Wisconsin to other schools, and there are a number of places that do these sorts of how much money is spent on administration, and we're down near the bottom among the public schools with less money spent on administration than many other places. That doesn't mean there aren't places to save, and we don't have to be careful, but it's not like we're running fat and happy, and all of you who are out there in the different agencies and in the university know that from your own experience. And then lastly, the third thing we're going to be looking at is other places around the university where we can raise revenues, where we could tax some things, where we can pull some money back. For instance, for those of you in the research area, we're going to be increasing the tuition remission that federal grants pay back to the university on graduate students. We're way below the federal limit on this, and we're going to increase that a little bit. That's one way for us to gain some additional dollars, and to be honest, to put at least the burden of some of these cuts into the research side of the university. We're going to take a central cut over time from some of our revenue-generating programs, which we haven't done in the past. Not a large cut, but something that does bring some money back to the center to support those programs. So, we're looking at everything we can. And I will say, even if we do all of that, and, Darryl and I have calculated, sort of what can we get out of all of the different ideas that we've got on the table right now, I will tell you, we really fall short this first year. To hit 90 to 100 million in cuts, I can get you about 55 million in money through all of the things that I've just discussed: tuition increases, budget cuts, revenue raisers. And I'm still $40 million short, at least, okay? And I've got to go looking for that. One way to look for it, obviously, is to spend it out of my reserves. I currently have $54 million in discretionary unallocated reserves. I really don't want to spend 40 million of that in 1 year, or I'm really in trouble if we have any risks hitting this university, okay? So, we'll come back, and I'm sure there'll be questions, so we'll talk about that. Let me say a few words about the public authority. As I suspect you also know, in addition to the budget, there's also a proposal for the whole system to become a public authority effective July 1st, 2016. It would convert the current Board of Regents into the governing board for that public authority. By becoming a public authority, we are no longer a statutory state agency. That means Chapter 36, which governs this university by statute, disappears, and the issues in Chapter 36 become regental policies adopted by the Board of Regents, which governs the public authority. Now, some of the things in Chapter 36 you all care and I care a great deal about, particularly some of the shared governance and tenure provisions. I will tell you, very confident. I have talked to almost all the regents about this. They understand the importance of this. They will adopt this language and put it into regental statute. And and I should note, almost every university I've been at outside of this one has those sorts of policies in regental statute. They are stable. They've been there a long time, and it's going to be a hard transition. I understand that, but it's a transition I think we can make without doing any damage to the university. For those of you who are worried about benefits, moving to a public authority keeps everyone not as a state employee, but a public employee, and through that designation, everybody stays in the state health care and pension programs. So you're in the same retirement program, for those of you who are worried about that. This public authority would give us some management flexibility, particularly around procurement and around construction, that if we use that effectively over time, will help us manage this university more efficiently. But I want to be very clear. We're talking about two very different issues here. We're talking about a public authority that, when this is set up, over time, after we've implemented systems and put in place some things that deal with things we've never dealt with before, maybe 2 to 3 years down the road, we might get some management efficiencies out of this. That won't help us at all with the budget cut in the next 2 years. So what can any of you who are interested in being involved in this more public discussion do? We are mobilizing here in a variety of ways at the university. Last week, the Alumni Association sent a letter to all of our alumni in the state of Wisconsin, encouraging them to look at the information on these budget changes and express their views to their legislators. We also did something we've never done before. We sent a letter to the parents of our Wisconsin-based students, asking them also to look at this information and consider the ways in which it might erode the quality of the education that their children here are receiving. We were working with profs, with ASPRO, with the student affairs offices, and I must say, students going in and talking to their legislators are one of our best people going out there. And we're targeting some business and civic leaders for some targeted interventions with various people. Should you wish to express your opinions on this, I certainly encourage you to do so through some of the existing organizations or on your own. Let me note that any advocacy work you do must be done on your own time and not use any University of Wisconsin resources, but to the extent you have stories to tell about the value of this university, about what you bring to it, about what you do here, why that's important. Those things are important to get out, and we've had some wonderful op-eds and articles written by some of our faculty and staff that have been in the newspaper in the last 2 weeks, and I hope that will continue. If you have relatives in other parts of the state, tell them to get involved too. I have basically 3 messages that I am delivering. Message number 1, these cuts are too big to handle, too big for this university, too big for this state. Number 2, these cuts will impact the educational quality of this institution and higher education throughout the state of Wisconsin. It will degrade student experiences. And message number 3, we are, with these cuts, jeopardizing the investments that generations of Wisconsin students have made over the last 166 years in making the University of Wisconsin, particularly the University of Wisconsin at Madison, an absolutely world-class university. So those are sort of a layout of the facts and what we're doing. We are all in this together, and I know we're going to have to work together, and I just really appreciate all of you coming out, and I look forward to hearing questions, comments, and to a public discussion. So, Joellen, you want to start moderating? Thank you.
So I invite people to come on up, and as we talked, please wait till you're acknowledged, and then we'll try to get you through here, as many people. So please start, sir.
I have a suggestion that you could save some money on, and that is to develop a Department of Innovative Education and allow members of the community, with approval of the department and a sponsoring faculty member, to teach courses at the university and free. That's exactly what I did 30 years ago at the University of Oregon. And I'm willing to offer similar courses today if you would set up a Department of Innovative Education and allow community members with appropriate approvals to teach for credit classes.
I will pass that along to the provost who runs the Office for Educational Innovation, and Steve Kramer, who's our vice provost on that. Thank you.
Do we have anyone from over this side? You want to come on up? And then we'll come over here.
Hi, thanks for your comments, Chancellor Blank. In this moment of austerity and uncertainty, I want to ask not what is at risk, but what are the values and attributes of this university that you see us doubling down on? What are the commitments that we recommit ourselves to?
So I said that we have a three-pronged mission at this university, and the first one is education, and we have a particular responsibility, given our past history, to education that is accessible to the citizens of Wisconsin, and then to the world as well, right? And I'm very committed to maintaining a high-quality education with particular access to the Wisconsin-based students. I think that's important. You know, as the state subsidy falls, it's going to become harder, but we have to figure out with the state how we work on that. Number two, we are a world-class research institution. The things that are done here in the labs and in people's offices have changed the world again and again, and we aren't going to lose that. We are going to work to keep the faculty and the staff who do that work as, you know, and maintain our quality there. And then lastly, and this is the one that particularly becomes hard to maintain as you're prioritizing programs, we have been very involved with outreach. The Wisconsin idea is built into the DNA of this place, as you all know from last week's discussion. And you know, it's really easy when you're looking and trying to prioritize to say we keep our education and research and we just cut back on all that outreach. But part of my reaction is if we're going to ask the state to continue to be a partner with us, we have to continue to be a partner with them. So, you know, this says that it's not like I want to let go of any of the three parts of that mission. I think they're all deeply important. So we're going to have to figure out how we prioritize and trim in, you know, particularly in the first and the third area, because our research enterprise isn't funded by the state. It's almost entirely funded by other institutions and harder, you know, I can't and don't want to cut there, right? I couldn't if I wanted to in many cases. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Chancellor Blank, I want to thank you very much for a clear and concise, sorry.
Yeah, closer.
I want to thank you for such a clear and concise presentation. It's a really nice way of laying out the real problems that the university faces us. I hope you'll pardon a brief anecdote. I'm not a Wisconsinite born and bred. I was raised in central New York. I was educated in central New York. When I started college, it was at a small Catholic school in Niagara Falls. In November of that year, my first semester, I got a call from my mom saying we couldn't afford to send me there anymore. I had to leave. I was okay with it. It turned out not to be the best college I could have gone to anyway, and I went to SUNY Oswego instead, the equivalent of a Whitewater or a La Crosse, certainly not of the same quality and thankfully not the same size as UW-Madison. Being able to afford to go to that school, which I still haven't paid off. My mother couldn't help me. I'm the children of people who didn't graduate college. I'm a rare member of this academic community here. I'm a graduate student in the English department. I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of my background. And for those reasons, I can't, in good conscience, and I hope that this university can't, in good conscience, endorse any more tuition hikes. This university has suffered too much The people of Wisconsin have suffered too much. You will continue to price out your own students. If already we're accepting almost a third of our students are out-of-state students, we're doing, I think, a great disservice to the state of Wisconsin, to its people. I was lucky enough to be educated in a system that still had, I believe, slightly more state support than the UW. I wish, even under a Republican governor, as it was when I was in school, for this reason, I can't condone, I can't endorse the public authority model, which will lead directly and immediately to tuition increases. I absolutely cannot condone this budget cut, and I know that you can't either. And I would almost rather see a nuclear option here than increasing tuition on the students of the state of Wisconsin anymore. People like me simply cannot afford to go to college. This is a tremendous burden, and we want to be here. We need to be here, despite the cost to the state, despite everything. It's worthwhile, and I think that's a message we need to send. Just one further question or comment. While I'm thankful that you're here today, I'm also wondering a bit why. I don't know why you're not in the smaller communities in Wisconsin taking this message to them. I support this university. Everybody here supports this university. You don't need to convince us. So what are you doing here?
So let me respond directly to both of those comments because they're important questions, okay? I'm here because this is the community that's going to be most immediately affected. And if I'm going to talk to you about budget cuts and layoffs, I'm going to look you in the face and listen to your comments, and I think that's very important. That's the main reason I'm here. Let me talk a minute about tuition, because obviously, the idea of tuition increases on in-state students is a difficult one, and there are not going to be any for the next 2 years. That is part of the budget proposal, as there haven't been for the last 2 years. Let me say 3 things here. The first one is one of the difficulties we have is the population of 18-year-olds in Wisconsin has been declining for a number of years, and by all population estimates will continue to decline. So if you're talking about things like expanding the number of out-of-state students, to be honest, we can pretty much serve the same percentage share of 18-year-olds in Wisconsin that we've long served, even with expanding that cap. I realize you and I can disagree on the specifics of that, but it actually gives us, the declining population is a problem in some ways for many of the other schools, and it gives us some wiggle room here on expanding out-of-state students without limiting the share of undergraduates here in the state that we're serving. Let me say, secondly, on the front of tuition, and I realize we just may disagree on this, and I know there are others in the audience who are going to disagree. So the contract that public universities, not just in Wisconsin, have long had with the state is that the state will subsidize, particularly in order to allow the university to offer at a much below cost education to the citizens of that state. That is one of the main reasons why the state subsidizes us. As we have seen declines from 40% of our budget down to 15% of our budget supported by the state, that subsidy has declined. And we therefore have to find some other sources of revenue. I will work as hard as I can to find other sources beyond just tuition, but some of that is going to be tuition. And I think the model we have to think about is less, do we all have one single absolute tuition level for everyone in Wisconsin, but can we raise tuition on higher income families and generate some additional financial aid to keep tuition lower on the middle and low income families for whom the cost of this university is still almost prohibitively high at times. And that's something we need to be talking about with the state as well. So, the tuition one is, we're going to continue to debate this, and I know that there's going to be disagreements, but, part of the question is, do we want to maintain a first-rate education and research university? To be honest, the price of that, not just at Wisconsin, but across the board at all public universities has gone up because the state subsidies have gone down. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Greg Padden. I'm an IT worker. I'd like to share an idea.
Can you talk into the mic a little more?
Sure. My name is Greg Padden. I'm an IT worker here at the university. I'd like to share an idea. The proposed budget cuts to the university requires bold, thoughtful, and unprecedented response from the student staff and faculty at this administration. In addition, the response must further strengthen and focus the UW's mission and recommitment to the Wisconsin idea, and at the same time gather support to Wisconsin citizens and countrywide. It was good to see the Chancellor's comments in the media about how big of the cuts would happen if proposed went through, citing massive cuts in many departments. But the average citizen of Wisconsin doesn't care. They don't care if we shut down the business school or the School of Medicine or the law school. Many average citizens would rather get their $5 property tax and buy one more beer a year than support the university. This is sad but true. But the university does have something that the average Joe cares deeply about. I was deeply disappointed that the Chancellor did not put this on the table as a possible department that could face deep cuts. Bucky Badger. Yes. Yes, the cutting to the bone of the athletics department, including pulling out of the Big Ten sports, must be on the cutting table. It's the only way the average citizen will support the university. At least publicly leak that the university is looking at which programs may be cut to absorb their share of the cuts. This may seem like a radical idea, but it'll generate a massive national buzz. The right wing has mastered the PR act of generating emotional support, and this battle will not be won only by facts and thoughtful responses. It will be won largely by publicly generating support from the average Wisconsin citizen through an emotional message. To buffer this idea, this is not a vengeful reaction. The announcement must be conveyed that the university extending the Wisconsin idea and better serving our students and increasing classes on nutrition, lifetime sports such as running, swimming, and cycling. Allowing citizens to enroll in the same classes, have access to personal trainers at very low cost and easy enrollment. The idea directly strengthens and focuses UW's core mission and furthers the Wisconsin idea. At the same time, it'll help bring all the rabid Badger fans to the cause of the university when the message is surrounded by the idea that we are backed into a corner and we are forced to make these drastic changes to meet the proposed budget cuts. Now, I'm a realistic, so you could do a couple other things. You could spin off the athletics department as a private entity, sell the entity the right to operate under the Badger branding and charge them $50, $80 million paid over a 5-year process. And then charge them back for the cost of facilities, power, cooling, staffing, police, parking, etc. Or you could support a 10-cent per pint beer tax sold in taverns during sports. Support the Badgers while drinking a beer and watching the game at your favorite tavern. I mean, come on, it's $5 for a pint of beer. I mean, that's all the budget cuts are actually being, it's $5 for an average citizen. Okay. Or all Big Ten sports, money goes directly to the general fund of the university. And the university then puts the funding back to the department at the same funding levels as like theater or drama because they're providing entertainment to the citizens of Wisconsin. Or sell beer at all Big Ten events, and that'd bring a lot of money, but that's kind of a joke. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. We could have a conversation on some of this, and I don't think engaging right now. If you want to hand the Vice Chancellor for Finance and Administration some of your ideas, I know he's going to take them.
Kill Bucky or save Bucky through a public outreach, because really, you could actually float the idea that, hey, volleyball or hockey is going away. Sorry, we can't afford it. If you like those, get behind us.
Okay,
get behind the university.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'll be brief. I'm Joanne Oravec from the University of Wisconsin at Whitewater. A new
Welcome.
public entity is forming. Whitewater's part of it, Madison's part of it, a lot of other schools. Do you see some types of new synergies, maybe economies emerging? If so, what kinds of synergies? How long might they take to emerge? And could they have some effect on the budgetary situation?
Yeah, you know, one of the questions here is how does the system survive this? And at the end of the day, that isn't my primary responsibility. It's the responsibility of President Ray Cross. He has already talked about the need to consolidate management and administration across a number of schools, particularly some of those that are struggling a little more financially, so that every school doesn't have its own complete set of HR and budget and other administrative units. And I know he's already working on that. I don't know how far that will go. I don't know what, so there's the administration. Then the other side, which I interpret in your question, is how do we work together on educational programs in particular? And I see a number of ways in which we and other schools are expanding that sort of work. I completely agree with you that, if we're going to work as a system and get through this, we're going to have to find more ways to collaborate rather than, basically reinventing the wheel separately on every campus. And it's a great one to have a conversation about.
My name's Travis MacArthur. I'm the treasurer for the Teaching Assistants Association, the labor union for all graduate student workers on campus. And I got the sense during your presentation that you're resigned to these cuts. You went through all of the measures that you were going to take in order to, as you say, absorb the cuts and how it's going to reduce the quality of the education here. And I want to let you know that the Teaching Assistant Association is ready to fight tooth and nail against these cuts. And we're coordinating with all interested bodies on campus to fight the cuts. And what I want to know from you is more details about how you're going to prevent these cuts from happening in the first place, rather than how you might have to deal with them in the eventuality that they come to pass.
So, yeah. No, I appreciate your question, and believe me, if I left the impression that I was happy about these cuts and willing to accept them as they were, that is a misimpression. I spent all day yesterday up at the other end of State Street talking with, I think, 15 different people in key positions in the legislature about the need to reduce these cuts. I did some more of that this morning. I'm doing more of it next week. That type of outreach from the leadership here is one thing we are doing. As I've noted, we have something that almost no other organization in the state has, which is an alumni base of some, I think, 150 to 160,000 alumni in this state, not to mention parents. And as I said, we've been working with the Alumni Association to get the message out to them, because many of them live in districts where some of the leadership in the legislature lives. We don't, and that's very important. Working closely with the Profs, ASPRO, the other groups here, and as I said, I think actually our students, particularly our students who come not from Dane County, but from other counties and other legislative districts in the state, and who are in districts where there, we have some major legislative leadership, going individually and talking about the impact of these cuts, if they are implemented at this level, on their education, on what's happening here on campus, could be some of the most effective things we can do. One of the things I'll just say, and it goes to the marketing issue. Yes, I'm talking about some of the big numbers, 90 million, 23 million. The numbers are important, and people have to understand them because they mean something to a lot of people. But most people aren't going to respond to those sorts of numbers. They're going to respond to anecdotes, right? Anecdotes of people whose lives were changed by being here at the university, anecdotes of students who are really, feeling their things threatened, of workers whose livelihood is threatened because of this. And we're going to all have to work together to get some of those anecdotes out into the public space. It's not something that we can do alone in Bascom Hall. So I appreciate the work that I know TAA is doing exactly around those sorts of issues.
Good afternoon, Chancellor Blank. Mark Manville, Division of Information Technology. I like your ideas. It sounds like you're on the right path as far as reinforcing to the state, reminding them the value of the university and what it contributes economically, educationally, et cetera. But on the other side, the threat side, based on conversations, what I read online and comment sections, et cetera, I think there's the number one problem is there's this myth about this $1 billion surplus. And I know it's, I work in financial stuff. I understand it, and I understand the 54 million and everything. But something, I don't know, there needs to perhaps be more effort to dispel and correct that misperception. I guess that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, thank you very much, because I think this is going to be a big issue that we're going to be constantly talking about in the next couple of months. As you know, 2 years ago, we were charged with having very large fund balances, and a slush fund, as it was called, and we're asked to pull that down, and there was a whole accounting process that the Legislative Audit Bureau went through to look at our fund balances. Now, let me be clear. Anyone who is a business person knows you never do cash balance accounting, you do accrual accounting. This state does cash balance accounting, so they take a snapshot of us at the end of the fiscal year and say how much money is in your pocket, right? Well, at any point in time, this is a huge organization. We're carrying money that we're going to pay out to students in terms of financial aid. We're carrying money that we're going to pay on bills due for construction projects. We're carrying funding that, you know, for a whole bunch of you that have labs that have made promises of money that you can spend in the future, but you haven't spent yet. And so we have big fund balances. But a fund balance is not a reserve and is not a slush fund, okay? The vast majority, 80% of our reported fund balances are either obligated, that means they have bills against them, or they're planned, that says they're going to have bills against them very soon, okay? So if you, by the accounting of the Legislative Audit Bureau, we have $54 million in discretionary reserves. One other comment, the majority of that is the indirect dollars we hold from the federal government. And I can't use federal indirect dollars to fill holes around the university. Those by law must be used in the research enterprise to support it of the university, okay? So my discretionary balances on the educational side are even lower. If you are a private sector company, the usual measure of thumb is that you ought to be keeping 1.5 to 2 months of discretionary reserves, and the larger you are, the bigger that potentially should be because of the risks that you run. By that metric, we're keeping less than a week of discretionary reserves, and not all of those, as I say, are fully discretionary. So I understand this makes good political points among certain groups. It is simply wrong, and I encourage all of you to speak out against that perception. And, you know, again, I will give you the facts you need on that one, and they'll be up on our budget website. Thank you for raising that. You want to go here? Oh, okay.
Hi, good afternoon, Chancellor Blank.
Yeah.
My name's Tom Kenny. I'm a registered nurse. I work at the medical school in animal research. And my question has to do with, I know how well employees are supported by the university, but if employees have to be laid off, how can we support those employees as well? Layoffs are very hard often on people's self-image. It can lead to substance abuse. It can lead to taking that anger at home to their loved ones. How do we support the employees that might have to be laid off?
Thank you very much for that question, and it's something that we've been talking about with the HR department. First of all, I will note that there are very clear advance notices on layoff. Most of our workers have at least a 6-month advance notice, so that there's time to do some planning. Now, is that going to help you if you find yourself without a job? You know, at least it's some time to prepare, but that can be a very difficult time. We are talking about building a bank of resumes of those who get laid off, so that new jobs that might become open are asked to look at that bank first, and if there are people who fit their qualifications, to absolutely interview laid off workers as first in line for new jobs that might become open. And I know that Daryl and the HR team are looking at some of the other counseling issues and how we might respond to that. We obviously are a little bit away from announcing anything with layoffs. We're still in the planning process, and I appreciate the fact that we do have to pay attention to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for planning.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Jessica Mason. I'm a PhD student in the anthropology department, and in the TA, obviously, as the shirt indicates. So a lot of people, I think it sounds like most people are on board with disliking the prospect of many hundreds of $1 million in cuts and budget cuts and so on. So that's an important part of the conversation right now, and that's maybe the most immediate part. But a lot of us are also concerned with the implications of the public authority model and what's going to happen with that. I mean, we all have a lot of questions about it, and there's been a lot of discussion of what that means in terms of after the 2-year tuition freeze, access to in-state students, what's going to happen to out-of-state student tuition. I happen to be an out-of-state student, although I've been here many years now in PhD school. One of the very specific small questions that I haven't heard anybody quite address yet is a phrase that you said in terms of sort of achieving flexibility. And so I kind of wanted to know what you meant by flexibility, aside from flexibility in setting tuition in the future. And particularly, you said something about flexibility in procurement and construction jobs, and that sort of got me thinking, you know, if that's flexibility in terms of maybe consolidating procurement of different things and getting some efficiency there, then great. But if flexibility means flexibility to move to more adjunct labor, more contingent labor, if it means getting cheap contract workers instead of unionized workers for different parts of the university, then that's a different story altogether. So I was wondering what you mean by flexibility.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, you know, the devil in anything that you set up is always in the details. I have worked very closely in the year and a half I've been here with the hospital. I sit on their executive committee. The hospital, as you may know, is a public authority created in the mid-90s. It took a while to get them set up in a way that functions. They function very effectively and have had, you know, almost complete control over their operations, their pricing, their management. I think they've done an excellent job of, you know, dealing well with their workers, dealing well with their business. And that's the sort of model I'd like to emulate here. But we do have to make sure that this is set up right. And that's going to be a big job. And I worry particularly about doing this sort of restructuring. At the same time, we're also handling very large budget cuts. You usually have to invest in restructuring. And one of the things, I've been saying this in all of my visits up on the other end of State Street, you know, you can't just expect this to sit like that. I mean, it's going to take time and energy and investment and real attention to the details. And you can't set it up on the 1st of July. It's got to take a little time to get to the right place. So, flexibilities. We already, effective July 1st, and many of you are involved and are still involved in the planning for this, have been given the flexibility to run our own HR system, okay? We have tried to set up an HR system that lets us deal with some of the disadvantages of being inside the state system. So, you know, job descriptions that just don't match because they work for the Department of Natural Resources, but they don't work for a research university. But we've also tried quite seriously to pay attention to things like layoff rules and protections for workers. And, you know, what you're going to see in this public authority, quite honestly, is what you will see anyway, even if it doesn't happen, which is that we will be running our own HR system and are acutely aware of some of the issues you raise. I expect everyone in this room is going to be looking at the implementation of that new HR system closely and calling us to account if they think we're not doing it well. So the new authorities here in terms of management are largely procurement and construction, okay? The HR flexibilities in some ways we will already have come July 1st. And as I say, many people in the room have been involved in the planning and conversations around that. Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Katie Sear. I'm a junior here at UW-Madison. I actually transferred this year from UW-Marathon County, a 2-year just right in the middle of Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And I was very involved in student government at UW-Marathon County, and I'm looking to get involved here. And I know Wisconsin has a really great history of supporting the student voice and shared governance guaranteed in 36095 of our state statutes. And I was just wondering how potentially student government could be affected through either the restructuring of the authority system or through the budget cuts, and how that could potentially affect funding for student government and segregated fees for student activities.
So I very much hope that there will be no effect whatsoever, not only on student government, on faculty and staff government. My expectation is, as soon, if indeed, this public authority would be given approval, if that happens in late May or early June, that the Board of Regents will move very, very quickly to make sure that there is in statute, when the public authority starts on July 1st, 2016, language that essentially replaces the language in Chapter 36 around shared governance and other protections. And as I say, I've never been at a university where this was in state statute. It's always been in regeneral statute. Almost all universities have it set up that way. I know how very important it's been to many people here that the symbolism of the fact that that was in state statute was very important to them. And this transition feels wrenching. You know, I might feel more optimistic about this because I've operated a lot of universities where what we're proposing is exactly the way the vast majority of them operate. But it does have to happen, and it is going to be some change. And I'm hoping that if we get down the line a year or two, it will feel completely smooth. The same protections will be in place. And, you know, if not, again, you're all going to call the regents to account, and I will too. I care a lot about the shared governance statutes.
Hi, I'm Tracy Williams-Macklin. I'm with the Alumni Association. I'm the Director of Diversity and Inclusion in NORA here. one of the things I've been doing is meeting with diverse alumni, thinking about how our students who will be alumni, who are of diverse backgrounds, how they can become engaged. And what I'm really interested in are, I know that's a priority for you, but how this may impact how we engage our alums and what value, which I know they do bring to the university, how we can keep that going despite the challenges.
Yeah. So the question is about diversity and specifically about alumni engagement on diversity. And let me answer that as well as the broader diversity question, which I think is an important one. So our Alumni Association is independent of the university. That's true of a number of publics. And they're funded independently through alumni donations. So the alumni outreach done through the Alumni Association shouldn't be affected by these cuts at all. Now, we do work closely with them on that, and I expect we would continue to, but they are not affected by the cuts the way some other parts of the university might be. For diversity programs in general, I'm not going to say that diversity programs remain completely untouched. I don't know that we can do that. I do know how important diversity efforts are to this university. We just finished a major effort at creating a new diversity framework that we're trying to, operationalize and implement over the coming year, and I don't want to stop that. We are going to try to keep that going and to put the funds in. It may narrow, as you know, they came up with 31 suggestions. We're pursuing 13 or 14 of them right now. We may have to slow that down to 10 next year. That type of thing this will roll out a little more slowly. But we can't afford, if we're going to stay a high-quality institution that's engaging in education in the 21st century, we have to be a diverse institution. And we all know at Wisconsin, we have to work at that a little harder than some other states. So, yeah.
Hello, my name is Alan Silver. I work in IT in the Department of Chemistry. I'm curious about the whole public authority model as far as how it will be governed and if those people who will be able to be held accountable, or if it might turn into some kind of ideological body.
Yeah. So the question is governance of the public authority and how it's held accountable. I believe the proposal, as it stands, it's always change, is that the current Board of Regents will be transformed into the governing body for the public authority, should that be approved. Now, let me note that there's not a public university in the country that doesn't have some form of public trustees or public regents. They are selected in different processes. I was at the University of Michigan for many years. They're publicly elected in Michigan. And I have to say, I thought that was the worst system I've ever seen, okay? Some of you have been there. In some cases, it's a combination of gubernatorial appointments and legislative appointments. Obviously, in Wisconsin, it's gubernatorial appointments. We have a long history here in this state of having people on the Board of Regents who care about the university. It's people who want to be appointed here tend to be people who, love this place. They've been at it. They want to really help serve it and improve it. And I see no reason why that is going to change. The accountability is always, in part, through all of the people inside the institution. There are plenty of ways to protest Board of Regent issues, and some of you have been involved in that, right? But it's also through the state government. And even with the public authority, that public authority is chartered by the state, and the state, it's both good and bad, does always have the right to reach in if they think something is going wrong and change that charter. So that's the way it's set up. Yeah.
Hello there, Chancellor. Thank you for coming and talking to us.
Yeah. Can you speak right into the mic? Yeah.
Thanks for coming here. My name is Chris Weber, UW electrician. And when you say public authority to us tradesmen, what you're telling us, what we saw happen at the hospital was on December 31st, they were fired. January 2nd, they were hired at a substantially reduced rate. I've heard anything from $10 an hour. So when you say public authority, that's not happy words for me and my fellow tradesmen.
Yeah. Thank you. And one of the things I'm trying to do is educate myself about what did happen when the hospital became a public authority. As I say, many things I think went right there, but I really do need to know more about the labor issues and what changed and what didn't change. And I appreciate your comment, and I do promise you that I will look at that closely.
Some of those people left there and came here to get away from
Yeah.
That's loud enough, I can talk.
Okay. Thank you.
I might not
Yeah.
be able to hear, but I can talk.
That's good.
Thank you for this opportunity, Chancellor. My name is Pat O'Callahan. I have worked for the UW for 36 years. I retired at the end of December as a classified staff. I also have a UW degree, 1976. I'm class of 1976. I have several questions. Okay, yeah. I have several questions. To follow up on that bit about the public authority, I know you keep mentioning that other schools have their authority in the Board of Regents. There was a recent proposal in the legislature to change the terms from the Board of Regents from 7 years to 3-year terms. My understanding is the reason they are 7 years is so that no one governor can pack the Board of Regents. Point one. Point two, there was a recent change last year where the university started doing classified research more openly than it had in 40 years. It wasn't discussed very much. I believe that there was a new Center for Computer Security that came to campus. I think that that type of a center is a good idea. My concern is, since many people who are doing research are graduate students, and many of them have taken fairly substantial pay cuts due to the changes that have already happened with things like the payments for their health care. This doesn't seem like a very good model for something that's so important to our country, that we're doing this classified research, and yet it's really people that are maybe making $15,000 a year. To follow up on that, I've read articles that many people going to food pantries are adult students with children, and I think the other big group was military families. I noticed that the ASM had proposed having a food pantry for undergraduates and other students on the UW-Madison campus. Point three, sick leave conversion. Since I'm an older person, real quick.
Because, yeah, we need to.
I know, you need to keep it moving. Sick leave conversion for many older people, and the campus has many baby boomers ready to retire, is a really crucial issue. That's part of the reason why I retired, in addition to the attitude that was coming out of uptown. There was a proposal to, a report to change the UW's and the state sick leave to go from group health cooperative or other cooperatives that we were forced into basically 30 years ago, which saved the state money, and that are local, to change the health care to an insurance company that's in Atlanta. Now, I know it's being talked about as a report, but that's a pretty major change. So I'd like to know that, more information on that. And then the last one is the gentleman that had the comment about football. I have relatives in Dodge County, and I think he is right about that, or at least having them share some of the cuts. Because I have relatives, you try to talk to them about all this other stuff about Madison.
Okay,
Everybody in Madison's all,
let's finish.
all excited about this. They don't care. The main thing they pay attention to is the football and the basketball.
So, a couple of comments, and let me just respond to a few of those things, because I know we're getting low on time, and if there is anyone else who wants to ask a question, I want to give that chance. The proposal for the current public authority does not change the terms of the Board of Regents. It remains at 7, which I agree is a good number. You don't want to shorten that. People get experience. It means they move across, they stay into the Board of Regents even across gubernatorial administrations. Senator Steve Nass has proposed this. I don't know if it's even a bill yet. I've heard no one else yet support it. And I am hopeful that that issue is, it's not part of the current proposal, and I'm at least cautiously optimistic it's not going to become so, but it's one we've got to watch closely. Classified research. This is a little different, but we wrote a new policy on classified research at the request of the state this last year. I encourage you to be in touch with the research office that Marcia Malik is the interim vice chancellor for. Ask to see a copy of that. I think you will find that it is quite aware of the need to protect graduate students in ways that make sure that this doesn't impact their careers negatively. But anyone who wants to look at that policy, it's, there's a report out from a governance group, and we're in the midst of sort of solidifying that into policy. Last comment on sick leave. I know people care a whole lot about this. This is one that we're still making sure that the sick leave provisions and the ability to convert sick leave are not changed by this. We do not have final confirmation. If for any reason this looks like it may not be possible, we are going to go in and say this has to be changed before anything is passed. But there's still sort of there are things we still don't know, and one of them is exactly, is it true indeed that our sick leave conversion stays that it is? I know how important this is to people here, and Daryl and I have been talking about this almost daily to make sure that everyone agrees this is part of what the public authority can and will do.
Okay, it is 3:35. We've got a questioner here. We'll take one more questioner after you go. Yeah.
And I am willing to stay here and talk to folks if you want to come forward, as there are others up here, and ask questions if you haven't had all of them answered yet.
Chancellor, thank you for being here. My name is Al Barnacle. I'm a graduate student in the School of Ed. And one thing that I do is I turn to social media when I try to figure out what the rest of Wisconsin is thinking. And some of the things we haven't addressed yet is the belief that this institution should only serve as a job training institution. And I was wondering if you could help me address that.
Yeah, so I've spent a lot of time since I come talking about not the educational mission of the institution, but about the research and innovation side. This is the ideas factory for the state. It is the presence of this institution that is going to bring in high-tech industry, that's going to create job growth. Some of you probably saw the report recently that says 76% of the job growth in Wisconsin over some recent period is here in the Madison area. That's not by chance. It's the presence of this university, I think, talking about the economic impact of the university, and we will have facts and things up on that budget website and have that available in other places as well. But I also want to say that thinking about our educational responsibilities as just preparing students for the job they get at age 22 or 23 is an incredibly inadequate way to talk about a university education. And I know this is not the crowd I have to give that speech to, but that is also a speech that I give frequently when I'm not on campus. So thank you. Thank you all very much for coming.
Is there one more question? Okay, you're it. Thanks.
All right, one more question, hopefully one to send people home with. I'm a new assistant professor here at the university, and I'm feeling a lot of things, but one of the things that I'm feeling is really powerless. I'm not knowing what to do. You directed us in your talk to talk to our legislators, but where I stall out in that directive is in thinking about what would possibly be an effective argument. I cannot imagine the mentality that says that this is a good idea, and so I can't imagine what would be an effective rebuttal. So I guess what I'm looking for is marching orders.
We have been,
tell us what to amplify.
We have been working on talking points, and our communications group has actually been testing different messages out there with the citizens of Wisconsin, and those 3 messages I gave you are the 3 messages that have by far the most resonance when we go out around the state. These cuts are simply too big, and you can talk about some of the things we've talked about here, that these cuts threaten the quality of education, and particularly those of you who are involved in the teaching mission can talk about how these cuts threaten the quality of education to our students. And thirdly, people take the legacy of the University of Wisconsin very seriously in this state. They're proud of it, and we need to tap into that and talk about the way in which this basically threatens the legacy of 166 years of citizen investment in this university. Those 3 messages are the 3 that I would charge you to take out when you talk to people.
I will write them on a banner and march them to the Capitol on Saturday, man.
Thank you.
I'm serious.